What if your first day at your dream job became your last day on Earth? On January 14th, 2025, just weeks ago, a young Filipino nurse named Marisol Datal-Luhad walked through the gilded gates of a Palm Jumeirah mansion with hope in her heart and a future full of promise. Within hours, her body would be discovered in that same luxury villa, and a family's darkest secret would begin unraveling. But here's what the ongoing investigation is only now revealing. This wasn't a random tragedy. This was the inevitable outcome when desperation meets entitlement behind doors that money keeps closed. Today's story will show you that the most dangerous place in Dubai isn't the desert or the streets. It's inside the homes where no one is watching. The morning of January 14th, 2025, broke over Dubai with the kind of crystalline clarity that makes the city look like a CGI rendering of paradise. The sky stretched endlessly blue above the Persian Gulf, and the Palm Jumeirah, that audacious feat of engineering shaped like a palm tree extending into the sea, glittered with the morning light reflecting off hundreds of multi-million-dollar villas. For 29-year-old Marisol Datal-Luhad, standing at the gates of Villa 47, this moment represented everything she had sacrificed for. Marisol wasn't supposed to be here. Not really. Back in the Philippines, in the small town of Nabancharan in Davao de Oro province, she had graduated with a nursing degree from Davao del Norte State College. She had passed her board exams, completed her clinical rotations, and dreamed of working in one of Manila's top hospitals. But like thousands of Filipino healthcare workers before her, Marisol discovered that degrees and dreams don't pay bills or support families. Her mother, Leonora, suffered from chronic diabetes that required expensive medication. Her younger sister, Grace, showed exceptional academic promise but needed funds to continue university. Her father, Ernesto, a small-scale coconut farmer, watched helplessly as fluctuating market prices made their modest income increasingly insufficient. The math was brutal and simple. A nurse in the Philippines earned 15,000 to 25,000 pesos monthly, roughly $270 to $450. A domestic worker in Dubai earned $800 to $1,200, with free accommodation and food. Marisol made the calculation that broke her heart and saved her family. She would go to Dubai, not as a nurse, but as a nanny and domestic helper. She would trade her white nursing uniform for an apron, her medical training for childcare and housework. It was supposed to be temporary, 2 years to save money, pay off family debts, and return home to practice nursing. That was the plan she shared with her mother during their tearful goodbye at Davao Airport 3 weeks earlier. "I'll be back before you know it, Nanny," Marisol had promised, using the Tagalog term of endearment for mother. "And when I come home, we'll finally have enough. Grace can finish school. Your medicine will never be a worry again." Leonora had held her daughter's face between weathered hands, studying features she had known for 29 years as if memorizing them. "Be careful, Anak. Dubai is not like home. Those people live differently. Don't trust too quickly." The warning would prove prophetic in ways neither woman could have imagined. The recruitment process had been efficient and professional, at least on the surface. Marisol had worked with Al College Domestic Services, one of Dubai's registered recruitment agencies with a glossy office in Makati, Manila. The agent, a cheerful woman named Josephine, had presented the Alfared family as ideal employers. "They're Syrian, but they've been in Dubai for 20 years, Josephine explained, sliding a manila folder across her desk. "Mr. Khalil Alfared owns import-export businesses, very successful, very respected. Mrs. Amira is a housewife, very traditional but fair. They have 3 children, a teenage son, a 10-year-old daughter, and a 5-year-old boy. They specifically requested a Filipino nurse because of your reputation for gentleness and English proficiency." The contract looked standard. $900 monthly salary, private room, meals provided, 1 day off per week, 2-year commitment with repatriation costs covered. Marisol signed without hesitation, ignoring the small voice in her head that questioned why a family wealthy enough to afford a Palm Jumeirah villa would pay barely above minimum domestic worker wages. What Josephine hadn't mentioned, what perhaps she genuinely didn't know, was that the Alfred family had employed 7 domestic workers in the past 4 years. 2 had completed their contracts and left. 5 had terminated their employment early, requesting transfers through the agency with vague complaints about difficult working conditions and unreasonable expectations. The agency, dependent on placement fees and eager to maintain relationships with wealthy clients, had never pressed for details. Marisol's arrival in Dubai on December 28, 2024, had been a sensory overload. The gleaming airport, the shocking cold of air conditioning after Manila's humidity, the sight of women in abayas and men in kanjaras, the luxury cars, the impossible skyline of glass and ambition rising from desert sand. She had spent 2 weeks in the agency's accommodation, undergoing orientation sessions about UAE labor law, cultural sensitivity, and practical Arabic phrases. Always be respectful, the orientation leader stressed. Always say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. Never argue, never raise your voice. Remember, you represent all Filipinos. Your behavior reflects on your entire country. The pressure to be perfect, to be grateful, to never complain was woven into every instruction. Marisol absorbed it all, determined to be the model employee who would make her family proud and her sacrifice worthwhile. On January 13th, the day before she was scheduled to begin work, Marisol video-called her mother from the agency accommodation. Her face filled the small phone screen, eyes bright with nervous excitement. "Tomorrow is my first day, Nanny. I'm ready. I've studied everything about childcare, about Syrian culture, about how to manage a large household. This family will see how hard I work, and everything will be okay." Leonora smiled, but worry creased her forehead. "And they seem like good people, the family. The agency says they're very respected, very successful." Marisol's voice carried the forced optimism of someone trying to convince herself as much as her listener. "I'll call you tomorrow after my first day and tell you everything." That call would never come. Villa 47 on Palm Jumeirah was not just a house. It was a statement. Sitting on the frond of the artificial island, it boasted 7 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, a private beach, an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the Gulf waters, and a price tag north of $15 million. The exterior was modern Arabic architecture, all clean lines and warm stone, with Mashrabi-inspired screens that provided privacy while allowing breezes to flow through. But luxury is just decoration. What matters is what happens inside. When Marisol arrived at 7:30 a.m. on January 14th, delivered by the agency's driver, she was greeted not by the family but by Suad, the Syrian housekeeper who had worked for the Alfareds for 18 months. Suad was 42, heavy-set, with tired eyes that had seen too much and said too little. "You're the new nanny?" Suad asked in Arabic-accented English, looking Marisol up and down with an expression that wasn't quite welcoming. "Yes, ma'am, I'm Marisol. I'm very happy to be here and ready to work hard." Marisol's smile was genuine, hopeful. Suad made a sound that might have been a laugh or a warning. "Come, I'll show you your room first, then you meet Madam Amira." The staff quarters were in a separate wing of the villa, architecturally beautiful but unmistakably segregated from the family's living spaces. Marisol's room was small but private. A single bed, a narrow wardrobe, a tiny attached bathroom. The single window looked out onto the villa's service entrance and the garbage collection area. No Gulf views for the help. "Put your things here," Suad instructed. "Then come to the kitchen. Madam will want to see you." As Marisol unpacked her modest suitcase, a few changes of clothes, her nursing textbooks that she still hoped to study, photos of her family, a small wooden cross, she felt a flutter of nervousness in her chest. This was it. Her new life was beginning. Amira Alfared was 41 years old with the carefully maintained appearance of someone for whom beauty was currency. Her black hair was styled in expensive layers, her makeup was subtle but professional, and her casual at-home outfit, designer loungewear, probably cost more than Marisol's entire wardrobe. She stood in the kitchen's center island, scrolling through her phone, when Marisol entered. "Madam Amira, this is Marisol, the new nanny," Sue had announced in the deferential tone of someone who had learned to make herself small. Amira looked up, her eyes scanning Marisol with the detached assessment of someone evaluating an appliance. "You're the nurse." "Yes, ma'am. I graduated from Davao del Norte State College with a degree in nursing. I'm very experienced with children and—" "I don't need your resume. The agency sent your file." Amira's tone wasn't cruel, just disinterested. "My children are my priority. Omar is 15 and doesn't need much supervision. Layla is 10. She needs help with homework and activities. Rashid is 5 and requires constant attention. He has energy." The pause before energy carried weight that Marisol didn't yet understand. "Of course, ma'am. I love children and I'm very patient. Your duties start at 6:00 a.m. You'll prepare the children for school, pack their lunches, ensure Rashid eats breakfast. After school drop-off, you'll clean the children's rooms, do their laundry, and prepare afternoon activities. Pickup is at 2:30 p.m. Evenings include homework supervision, dinner prep assistance, and bedtime routine. Rashid goes to bed at 8:00 p.m. Questions. The schedule allowed no gaps, no breaks, no time to breathe. Marisol's smile wavered slightly but held. "No, ma'am, I understand." "Good. Your day off is Friday unless we need you, in which case you'll take another day. Mr. Alfred expects perfection. We pay you well, so we expect excellent service." $900 monthly for what amounted to 14-hour days, 7 days a week, unless they needed her, which in wealthy households usually meant always. The math worked out to roughly $2 per hour. But Marisol didn't protest. She needed this job. Her family needed this money. Perfection, she told herself, was something she could deliver. What Amira didn't mention were the household's unspoken rules. Don't make eye contact with Mr. Khalil unless he addresses you directly. Don't enter the master bedroom under any circumstances. Don't ask questions about family matters. Don't use your phone during work hours. Don't complain. Don't resist. Don't refuse. These rules weren't written in her contract. They were woven into the power dynamics that governed every interaction between employers and domestic workers in homes across Dubai. Invisible chains that bound women like Marisol to silence and submission. Marisol met Rashid at 9:00 a.m. after the older children had been driven to school by the family's driver. The 5-year-old burst into the living room like a small tornado, his energy immediately apparent. He was a beautiful child, dark curly hair, huge brown eyes, dimpled cheeks. But within minutes, Marisol understood what Amira's pause had meant. Rashid didn't walk, he ran. He didn't speak, he shrieked. He didn't play with toys, he hurled them. When Marisol gently tried to engage him in a puzzle, he swept the pieces onto the floor and laughed. When she suggested drawing, he grabbed markers and scribbled on the white leather sofa before she could stop him. "Rashid, Habib, we don't draw on furniture," Marisol said softly, using the Arabic word for dear that she'd learned in orientation. She tried to take the marker, and Rashid's response was immediate and shocking. He bit her hand, hard enough to break skin. Marisol gasped, instinctively pulling back. The child looked at her with those beautiful eyes and smiled. Not the innocent smile of a confused child, but something colder. He was testing her. "Rashid hurt you?" Sue had appeared in the doorway, her expression unsurprised. "It's okay, he's just playing." Marisol wrapped her bleeding hand in a tissue, her nursing training automatically assessing the wound. Not deep, but painful. "He's not playing," Sued's voice was flat. "The last nanny lasted 3 weeks, the one before her 6 days. Rashid is difficult." "I can handle difficult. I've worked with special needs children in my clinical rotations." Marisol's determination outweighed her pain. She couldn't fail on her first day. What Marisol didn't know, what Sued had learned but would never articulate, was that Rashid's behavior wasn't a medical condition. It was learned. In a household where the parents' marriage was a battlefield conducted in whispers and cold silences, where Amira's frustration had no outlet except control, and where Khalil's absences spoke louder than his presence. Rashid had absorbed the family's dysfunction and expressed it in the only way a 5-year-old could, through chaos. The morning deteriorated from challenging to impossible. Rashid refused to eat lunch, threw his plate on the floor, and when Marisol tried to clean the mess, he kicked her shin hard enough to leave a bruise. When she attempted to interest him in educational games, he screamed until his face turned red. When she suggested outdoor play by the pool, he ran through the house, knocking over a decorative vase that shattered into expensive pieces. Amira's reaction to the broken vase was ice-cold fury. "This vase was a wedding gift from my mother. It's irreplaceable." "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Rashid was running and I tried to catch him." "You're responsible for controlling him. That's your job." Amira's voice could have frozen water. "The cost will be deducted from your salary." The vase, Marisol would later learn from Suad, was worth $800, nearly her entire month's wages. For a mistake that happened in her first 4 hours of work, while managing an uncontrollable child with no prior training or support. But Marisol didn't argue. She apologized again, fighting tears, and returned to her duties with Rashid, who seemed delighted by the chaos he'd created. Khalil Alfared arrived home at 4:00 p.m., and the villa's atmosphere changed instantly. Amira's cold distance became performative warmth. Suad moved faster, quieter, making herself invisible. Even Rashid's chaos dimmed slightly, as if the child instinctively understood that his father's presence demanded different behavior. Khalil was 52, with the distinguished appearance of a man who had aged into authority. His salt-and-pepper beard was meticulously groomed, his kandjara was perfectly pressed, and he moved through his home with the confidence of someone who owned not just property but people. He had built his fortune importing European luxury goods and exporting regional products, a business that required connections, discretion, and the kind of moral flexibility that came naturally to him. "This is the new nanny." His question was directed at Amira, but his eyes were on Marisol. "Yes, Marisol, she started today." Amira's tone was careful, measured. Marisol offered a respectful nod, keeping her eyes lowered as Suad had instructed. "Good afternoon, sir. It's an honor to work for your family." Khalil's gaze lingered a moment too long, traveling from her face down her modest uniform and back up. "You're young. How old?" 29, sir." "Married?" The question was inappropriate, bordering on invasive, but in this context, Marisol had been trained to answer. "No, sir, single." Something flickered in Khalil's expression. Interest, calculation, something predatory that Marisol's instincts registered as danger even if she couldn't articulate why. "Good. Married women have divided loyalties. My children need someone fully committed." The rationalization was so smooth, so reasonable-sounding, that the underlying threat was nearly invisible. But Suad, standing by the kitchen entrance, caught Marisol's eye for just a second, and in that glance was a warning: be careful. Khalil disappeared into his study, and the villa exhaled. Amira's warm facade cracked back into cold efficiency. "Prepare Rashid for his tutor session at 5:00 p.m. Make sure he's clean and calm." Calming Rashid proved impossible. The child, sensing his nanny's growing exhaustion and anxiety, escalated his behavior. He refused to change clothes, then stripped completely and ran naked through the villa. He locked himself in a bathroom and wouldn't respond to Marisol's increasingly desperate pleas. When she finally coaxed him out, he immediately went to his father's study, the one room she'd been told never to enter, and pushed the door open. Khalil looked up from his computer, his expression darkening. Marisol rushed forward to retrieve Rashid, stammering apologies. "I'm so sorry, sir. He got away from me. It won't happen again." "Control him." The command was quiet but absolute. "This is your only warning." As Marisol led Rashid away, she felt Khalil's eyes on her back, that same assessing gaze that made her skin crawl. This job, she was beginning to realize, was nothing like the agency had described. The villa's luxury was a beautiful trap, and she had walked into it willingly, desperately, with nowhere else to go. Evening brought no relief. After the older children returned from school, Marisol discovered that her duties expanded exponentially. She was expected to supervise homework for all three children simultaneously, despite them being in different rooms and requiring different levels of help. She was expected to assist with dinner preparation while keeping Rashid from destroying the kitchen. She was expected to manage bedtime routines that involved negotiations, tantrums, and chaos. By 9:00 p.m., when Rashid finally fell asleep, exhausted from his own misbehavior, Marisol stood in the kitchen with Suad, her body aching, her hand still throbbing from the bite mark, her shin bruised, her spirit fractured. "First day is always hardest," Suad offered, her sympathy genuine but limited. In households like this, solidarity between workers was dangerous. Supporting each other meant risking your own position. "Does it get easier?" Marisol's voice was small, defeated. Suad didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "Keep your phone charged, keep your door locked at night. Don't be alone with Mr. Khalil if you can help it." The warnings were specific enough to be alarming, but vague enough to offer deniability. Marisol wanted to ask more, but Suad had already turned away, disappearing into her own quarters as if the conversation had never happened. Marisol returned to her small room at 9:30 p.m. She sat on her narrow bed, surrounded by the nursing textbooks she'd brought with foolish optimism, and finally allowed herself to cry. This wasn't what she'd imagined. The family wasn't kind or fair. The child was unmanageable. The father's gaze made her feel exposed and vulnerable. The mother's coldness made her feel worthless. She pulled out her phone, intending to call her mother, but hesitated. What would she say? That she wanted to come home after one day? That she'd failed before truly trying? That the $800 vase deduction meant she'd worked her first month for $100? Her mother's diabetes medication cost $200 monthly. Grace's university fees were due in 3 weeks. Their small house needed repairs that her father couldn't afford. Marisol couldn't come home, not yet, not empty-handed, not as a failure. She typed a message instead. "First day went well, family is nice, house is beautiful, I'm tired but happy, I'll call soon, love you, Nanny." Every word was a lie. But sometimes lies are the kindest gift we can give to people who would suffer from the truth. Marisol fell asleep still in her uniform, too exhausted to change, her phone still in her hand, never suspecting that she would never send another message to her mother. Never knowing that somewhere in the villa, Khalil Alfared sat in his study, reviewing security camera footage that captured every angle of his home, including the staff quarters, watching the new nanny sleep, making decisions about her future that would determine she had none. The first day had ended, but the real horror was just beginning. What happened in the hours between 9:30 p.m. on January 14th and 6:00 a.m. on January 15th remains the subject of ongoing police investigation. But the evidence that has emerged paints a picture of calculated violence that shocked even Dubai's experienced homicide detectives. Marisol's body was discovered by Suad at 6:15 a.m. when the housekeeper came to wake her for the morning routine. The door to Marisol's room was closed but unlocked. Inside, the young nurse lay on her narrow bed, her eyes open but unseeing, her body bearing injuries that spoke of sustained violence rather than a sudden attack. The official police report, leaked to Philippine media outlets and shared on Facebook by advocacy groups, documented multiple traumatic injuries. Severe head trauma consistent with blunt force impact, defensive wounds on her forearms suggesting she had tried to protect herself, bruising around her throat indicating strangulation, and evidence of a struggle in the small room where furniture had been overturned. Suad's screams brought Amira and Khalil running. The couple's reactions in those critical moments would later be scrutinized by investigators. Amira allegedly became hysterical, demanding to know what happened. Khalil allegedly remained calm, too calm, immediately calling the family's lawyer before calling the police. When Dubai police arrived at 6:47 a.m., they found a scene that contradicted the family's emerging narrative. The Alfareds were already claiming that Marisol must have been attacked by an intruder, perhaps someone who had scaled the villa's walls from the beach. But several facts immediately undermined this theory. The villa's sophisticated security system showed no breach. Every door and window had remained secure throughout the night. The only footage gaps were in the staff quarters, where cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned between 10:00 p.m. and 5:00 a.m., a technical failure that seemed remarkably convenient. Marisol's room showed signs of a struggle, but nothing had been stolen. Her phone, her small amount of cash, even the modest jewelry she wore were untouched. If this was a robbery gone wrong, the robber had taken nothing. Most damning, forensic evidence would later reveal that Marisol's injuries were inconsistent with a surprise attack by a stranger. The positioning of her body, the nature of her defensive wounds, and the timeline of her injuries suggested she had been attacked by someone she knew, in circumstances that gave her no opportunity to escape from a room she should have been safe in. The Dubai Police Criminal Investigation Department moved quickly, as they always do when wealthy families are involved and international attention is likely. The villa became a crime scene. The family was questioned separately. Suad was interviewed for hours. The security footage was seized. The recruitment agency was contacted. But within hours, another dynamic emerged. One that advocates for domestic workers in the Gulf had seen countless times before. The power imbalance between a wealthy, well-connected Emirati family and a dead Filipino domestic worker began to shape the investigation in ways that had nothing to do with justice. The Alfared family's lawyer, a prominent attorney named Rashid Al-Manswari, who had represented multiple high-profile clients in Dubai, immediately established a narrative. Marisol had been a troubled young woman, perhaps involved in relationships or activities that the family knew nothing about. The staff quarters were separate from the main house. Anything could have happened there. The family was cooperating fully, but they were also victims of this tragedy that had occurred in their home. The narrative was skillfully constructed to suggest mystery without implicating anyone, to express sympathy without accepting responsibility, to cooperate without revealing anything useful. News of Marisol's death reached the Philippines within hours, spreading first through the tight-knit Filipino community in Dubai, then through social media, finally through official channels to her family in Nabancharan. Leonora Datal received the call from the Philippine consulate in Dubai at 8:00 a.m. Philippine time, January 15th, barely 12 hours after her daughter had typed that final, optimistic lie about how well her first day had gone. The mother's anguished cry, heard by neighbors throughout their small barangay, became the sound that represents every family's nightmare when they send a loved one abroad. The dream of a better life had become a coffin on a cargo flight home. The Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs issued a statement demanding a thorough investigation. Senator Risa Hontiveros, a vocal advocate for overseas Filipino workers, called for accountability and transparency. Filipino advocacy groups in Dubai began organizing, demanding justice for Marisol and protection for the hundreds of thousands of domestic workers living in situations of vulnerability throughout the Gulf. On social media, Marisol's story exploded. Her Facebook profile, filled with photos of her nursing graduation, her family, her hopes and dreams, became a memorial page. Instagram posts from friends described her kindness, her dedication, her sacrifice for family. The hashtag Justice for Marisol trended in the Philippines, accompanied by calls to reform the domestic worker system that had cost another young woman her life. But hashtags don't prosecute crimes. Social media outrage doesn't compel investigations in jurisdictions where power and money can buy silence. As of today, weeks after Marisol's murder, the investigation remains officially ongoing. The Alfared family has not been charged with any crime. They have, however, quietly left their Palm Jumeirah villa, reportedly relocating to their secondary residence while the investigation continues. The property sits empty now, its luxury preserved, but its reputation destroyed. Suad, the housekeeper, disappeared from Dubai within days of Marisol's death, reportedly terminating her contract and returning to Syria under circumstances that remain unclear. Attempts by investigators to interview her have been unsuccessful. The recruitment agency, Al-Khalij Domestic Services, released a statement expressing sorrow and emphasizing that they conduct thorough background checks on all employer families. They did not address why a family with a history of rapid domestic worker turnover continued to receive placements. The Dubai police have stated only that they are pursuing multiple leads and that the investigation is being treated with utmost seriousness. They have not named suspects. They have not shared details of their findings. They have not indicated when the case might be resolved. For Leonora Datal, sitting in her small house in Nabincharan, surrounded by photos of the daughter who left to save her family and came home in a casket, the silence is unbearable. Justice delayed becomes justice denied, and every day without answers is another day that Marisol's death remains unexplained, unpunished, unmourned by anyone except those who loved her. The dream that drew Marisol to Dubai, the promise of prosperity, of safety, of opportunity, has become a nightmare that haunts thousands of domestic workers still working in similar villas, with similar families, under similar conditions. The beautiful cage of luxury that was supposed to be her salvation became her tomb. And the question that keeps her mother awake each night echoes through every household that has sent a daughter abroad. What really happened in that room? Who killed Marisol? And why does wealth seem to purchase not just luxury, but immunity from consequences? The investigation continues. The truth remains buried beneath layers of power, privilege, and the systematic devaluation of lives that don't matter enough to those who make decisions. But Marisol's story refuses to stay silent. It demands to be told, to be heard, to force us to confront the brutal reality that behind the gleaming towers and artificial islands of Dubai, human lives are still being destroyed by the same old evils: greed, entitlement, and the belief that some people matter more than others. The case of Marisol Datal-Luhad remains open. Justice remains waiting. And the villa on Palm Jumeirah remains a monument to a truth that Dubai's glittering facade can never quite hide. That paradise built on inequality is always one murder away from being exposed as hell. Justice for Marisol. This story is based on ongoing investigations and available information. The details of what happened that night in Villa 47 are still being uncovered. But what we know for certain is this: a young woman with dreams died on her first day of work, and someone knows why. Until that truth emerges, her story deserves to be told, remembered, and used to protect the countless other domestic workers whose safety depends on the goodwill of employers who hold all the power. What would you do if you discovered your dream opportunity was a death sentence? When does desperation make us vulnerable to those who see humans as disposable? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Marisol's voice was silenced, but ours don't have to be.